This week, my guest is the Executive Director of Rebuild New Hampshire and a former state legislator, Melissa Blasek. She joins me to talk about the craziness of the New Hampshire House budget, and we're going to go over some of the good, bad, and ugly bits, as well as a surprising separation of powers win that they snuck in there. That, health freedoms, and more. Stay tuned. Grok Talk starts in less than 60 seconds. Not everyone can get up every day and look for ways to piss people off. But here at GraniteGrok.com, we do that almost every day. I can't tell you how many times someone's lost their SHIT and threatened to end us. But we're still here, pissing people off. It's almost like we enjoy it. And we've been doing it since 2006. That's almost 2 decades of news, politics, and opinion, and now podcasts. And we're just getting started. We believe in principles before parties and politicians. We defend free markets and individual liberty, and if that makes you mad, it makes us smile. We're like Grandma after she stopped caring what other people thought. If that sounds refreshing, you need to check us out. This is Steve McDonald for Granite Grok, and we'll keep shining the light on them for you. Grok Talk. So we are back for another edition of Grok Talk, brought to you by GraniteGrok.com and Grok Media LLC. Yeah, that's the name of my company. Anyway, my guest, as I mentioned earlier, was Melissa Blasek, and she's Executive Director for Rebuild New Hampshire, and she spends a lot of time in the State House because she's their lobbyist, and that's got to be fun, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But we just passed this budget thing that everybody's been talking about, HB1 and HB2, and of course HB2 is our trailer bill in which they stuff everything that they want to try and pass, and that's what we're going to talk about because it's passed the House this week. The governor's going to sign it. We've got good, we've got bad, we've got ugly, and Melissa's here to help us sift through that. How are you doing this evening?
I am great. Happy to be here. I have to correct you, though. The governor has already signed it. It is 7:30 on Friday, and she signed it late this afternoon.
Okay, great. Good to know. I knew she signed a bunch of stuff. I saw an email. Governor signs 32 bills or something, and I just kind of skimmed through it. And so,
gosh,
all right, good. It's done.
Look.
It's done. I'm very excited. I don't have to get my car inspected next year. Yay, team.
Yeah, we'll get into all that. Oh, yeah.
Yes, we will.
There's some great accomplishments that we've been working at for years. And there are, of course, in any omnibus, things you have to swallow. Luckily for New Hampshire, we have one true omnibus every 2 years, unlike D.C., where every bill is an omnibus.
It's true. It's true. All right. So you spent a bulk of the you did well. First of all, thank you, because it's a thankless job. Even though you're a lobbyist, technically, you go up there, but you have to sit in there and deal with this stuff, and people don't really get what that's like. You know, they have to go up there for hearings, and so let's just appreciate that you're willing to go up and do that and fight for liberty.
Oh, I appreciate it. I call myself the Liberty Lobbyist. I have a podcast called The Liberty Lobbyist, and it's because, I'm barely, quote, a lobbyist in that I get paid 5 cents, and if you get paid 5 cents, then you have to be a registered lobbyist. Right. So the first time I ever put on the orange lobbyist badge, I will say I felt like I needed a shower or something because I had spent so long in the State House as an activist or a legislator, and I viewed lobbyists in a very negative light, and but that's for good reason. Most lobbyists are there to advocate for special interests. They are not there, their own financial interests. They are absolutely not there to advocate for liberty in any way. I think there are just a couple of handful of us that are really there for maybe only on few specific issues, but we're there for sort of altruistic reasons that benefit the greater good and the general people of New Hampshire. And I feel very fortunate that I have the ability to be there to do that for other people, but just for myself and my family.
Yeah, and it is nice. And that was one of the things about me doing this, trying to do this more often, was that I would try to get to Concord, and I don't make enough money being a blogger or running a website, so I have other jobs, one of which is doing some work for Rebuild New Hampshire, just so we all understand. And so I can't get up there. And so I get invited to things all the time, all kinds of events, and I'm like, crap, I got to work. So I don't get to do it. So the people that do, including the legislators who, get their lousy $100 a year plus mileage or whatever, they've invested the time to do it. And you get to hang out with them a little bit. And we've come to the end of the session. Everything that's happened has happened. So let's talk about the budget. I don't know if you want to start with the good or the bad or the ugly, but I'll leave that up to you.
Well, it was certainly a photo finish yesterday with the budget passing by a single vote after having failed by a single vote and been tabled. And, I was watching it live at home. I'm in a chat with a bunch of other people who run liberty groups in the state. And somebody described it as the most compelling season finale to his favorite show. Um, and I thought that was beautiful. It was exactly how I felt. I mean, man, the adrenaline was running. And I will say, going in, I desperately have attempted every single time since Rebuild's founding in 2020 to never be involved in the budget because I hate having to be involved in an omnibus because you do have to always swallow something bad to go with the good. Fortunately, I have not managed to avoid being involved in a budget yet. 21, it was me and Rebuild that really held the budget hostage for state of emergency reform, for ending the COVID state of emergency. We did end the COVID state of emergency. We did get a reversal and forgiveness of all COVID fines and charges out of that budget. And we did get some meaningful state of emergency reform that then we got more in the 2023 budget. And now we're in 2025. And a bill, and I worked hard to get that bill attached to something else, anything else besides the budget, so that it wouldn't come down to the budget. And yet, whoops, it came down to the budget because, when this bill in its original form reached the Senate, I told the chair of that committee, I said, you can do this the easy way or you can do this the hard way because I will fight this all the way till the end of June. I'm not playing. I'm not doing this anymore. This bill is 20 years in the making and it is going to happen one way or the other. And well, he chose the hard way, which was really unfortunate for me. Okay. But we did accomplish it. So this is end of rulemaking for the vaccine schedule. So New Hampshire is, one of 50 states with vaccine mandates for school attendance, right? That's a pretty standard thing. That's something that I consider to be we ceded ground for liberty decades ago when we all just blindly rolled over and accepted that they could tell us to get any shot that we wanted just to walk into a school. But it's something that we've been living with. And I think a lot of us woke up during COVID, but there have been people who have been fighting to end the rulemaking. Now, what is the difference between rules and statutes? So statute is written, those are the laws, right? They're written by legislators. They go through the full legislative process. Rules are made by unaccountable and unelected bureaucrats who the legislature loves to say that they have some type of legislative oversight, and that is functionally not totally true. It just isn't. There is something called the Joint Legislative Committee on Administrative Rules, which are made up of legislators, a very small group of them, but they can't say no just because they don't like the policy of a rule. That's not possible the way that the law is written right now. So what has happened is that years ago in the 80s, the legislature, they delegated authority to the Department of Health to add in rules any vaccine that they ever wanted. And the Joint Legislative Committee on Administrative Rules has no ability to ever deny them their request based on the vaccine of their choice. Okay. So they have been fairly conservative over the years. They've only added 3 vaccines into rules. But I've been very concerned, especially with the RSV vaccine coming up, that they are going to make moves, and they have hinted that they are going to make moves to add the RSV vaccine through rules. So anyway, I don't want to go too into the weeds, but that was killed originally in the Senate. The original bill was killed in the Senate. We attached it to 2 other bills, one of them being the budget. They killed the other bill, the Senate did, and then it became this massive fight within the legislature. We have the Vaccine Injury Caucus in the House that decided to make this their top priority, and I helped them push this thing in committee of conference, and they got it in, and it passed. So that was Rebuild's number 1 priority. The only other thing that we engaged on in any other way that made it into the budget was the 15-mile exclusionary zone for hospitals. What does that mean? It's a little in the weeds.
I hate that thing.
Yeah, right? It's a little in the weeds, but it's like essentially, I don't know, like it. By ending this, it's like ending the ability for hospitals to unilaterally block competition, because that's what happens right now. It's sort of the last thing that we have left of what is it called, the Register of Needs that a lot of states have.
yeah, that thing. Oh
Yeah,
God, now I can't think of what it's called.
Certificate of Needs. That's what it's called.
Certificate of Need boards.
Yes.
Yes.
And other states have that. We had sort of gotten rid of it, but we still had this element to it. So that, I think it's a modest free market healthcare reform, but that was in the budget. And I think that that is definitely a win. Other wins, well, the DEI ban is great. I think we're really going to be able to stick it to UNH, who's been out there just like saying, oh, no, we're not going to, abide by the president's DEI ban. No, we're not doing it. We're going to do whatever we want to do. Well, okay, you can do whatever you want to do, but you're going to lose all state funding now. And you are.
Yeah, I love that. And for people who aren't familiar with that 50-mile radius thing,
oh, yes.
It basically prohibited competition. So like even like in Merrimack, they're affiliated with the hospital. They have to be. They can't not be, which means they can't have their own fee schedule. They can't say, no, we're not going to make people take this mRNA vaccine. They're screwed. The board of directors of that hospital runs that center, no matter what it is. And once you get rid of that radius, you can now begin to have actual competition and a market environment where private practice has a chance to thrive. So that's huge. Yes. And then the DEI thing, of course, is just crazy. I know people it's a very polarizing issue, but I'm glad we've managed that. So what else do we get?
Yeah, so we got that. So the DEI ban is basically saying that the state won't fund any schools or any contracts, period, with anybody who's enforcing DEI policies. Repeal of car inspections. We were one of only 16 states in the country with annual car inspection requirements. We will now join the vast majority of the country.
Oh, I know. I shared that at lunch today. We had a business lunch for somebody whose last day was today. And the company paid for lunch. And I'm like, I'm there. I'm going to drink beer. We're going to have pizza. It's on your dime. We're there. And the director of operations is like, absolutely, let's go. And they didn't know it had passed. They were very excited. Yes. They didn't even know about it. They didn't know it was in the pipeline, because most people don't know this stuff. They're not doing what we're doing, right?
Yeah.
So that was a huge one.
I find it very bipartisan. I mean, besides like some real partisan hacks on the left who are trying to make this into some kind of big thing, for the
blood in the streets.
Right, the sky is going to fall. And I'm not saying we had people on the right, certain politicians on the right, I will say, who were a little bit like that too. But I think that is a little bit they don't really believe it. I think they were getting a lot of money from certain groups who benefit from having,
Auto Dealers Association.
Yeah, exactly.
Like we don't want to name names.
I think the only people who honestly mean it are the true lefty loonies. But otherwise, I think the people in the middle are going to be very, very pleased. I knew this engaged people in politics that they had never expressed any type of interest in politics to me. But when they heard that this was in the pipeline, they wanted to know. And this has been all year. So we got that in there. We got real Medicaid work requirements. Okay, this is one that was a sleeper. Honestly, I didn't know about it until today. They kept it quiet, I think, sort of on purpose. This is the giant middle finger to the courts over the Claremont issue. So for those who aren't, fully aware, actually, you know what? I'm going to read it. So during the Claremont series of lawsuits, the New Hampshire Supreme Court ruled that the New Hampshire Constitution imposes upon the legislature 4 obligations with respect to public K through 12 education. 1, define an adequate education. 2, determine its cost. 3, fund it with constitutional taxes. And 4, ensure its delivery through accountability. And you know what? The legislature since then has really played ball with the courts and sort of allowed the courts to decide what the policy and what the funding of public schools are going to be, which is actually insane. When you really think about it.
It is. It's not even their job.
No, it's literally not their job. Judicial supremacy has gotten so out of control in this country, and this is just a fantastic, example of it. And so the New Hampshire legislature, as of today, has given them a giant middle finger and said, what are you going to do about it? Do you think, were you going to hold the legislature in contempt for setting policy and appropriating funds? And so it says, accordingly, the legislature now deems it necessary to definitively proclaim that as the sole branch of government constitutionally competent to establish state policy and to raise and appropriate public funds to carry out such policy, the legislature shall make the final determination of what the state's educational policies shall be and of the funding needed to carry out such policies. So that was huge. That should be very interesting to see the fallout of that now that that's really become public.
I think we could get Judge Boasberg to issue a injunction
against the legislature. That should be really. I mean,
against the New Hampshire legislature from the district court in D.C. Yeah, that's
yes. You know what? I want to see. I want to see a war really happen. I don't mean like a literal war, but like a war of the minds really happen between the legislatures and the judiciary, because people have acted for far too long like the judiciary has some type of veto pen. Okay, the founding fathers never created any type of veto pen for the judicial. That's ridiculous. That's an insane thought to our founders. And what they did mean is for there to be back and forth like what we just did, and real slapdowns occasionally, being like, no, listen, we set the policy, you don't set the policy. You're there to adjudicate differences between somebody who is standing against a law and somebody who does, right? You're supposed to work out differences, not set policy and appropriate funds. It's nuts.
It's been a good day. I mean, the U.S. Supreme Court issued a nationwide. They said nationwide injunctions are improper. Yep. So that's good. We've got this in our legislation, which I didn't know about. So I'm glad they kept it a secret. And now the court's going to be like, what are we going to do about that? And the legislature should do what it ought to have done, which is said, screw you. Yeah. And, oh, by the way, we can vacate the judiciary. And they really ought to. I mean, it's gotten so bad in the state of New Hampshire, and they have the authority. They can just say, goodbye.
Yeah.
We're going to replace all of you. So anyway.
No, I completely agree. They've just been up on their high horse for way too long. So those are some of the major policy wins. As far as it is a budget, should be about money, right? It didn't add a single new government position. In fact, it cut quite a few government positions. So, I mean, that's a good thing. Is the dollar amount less than the previous budget cycle? No. However, it did not grow past the rate of inflation. And that is, my understanding is that is within the Republican Party platform, is that budgets can grow to accommodate for population increase and inflation. I appreciate the people on the right who are always trying to push for more and more and more fiscal conservatism, and I agree with them. I did, at some point during the cycle say, and they would kind of be like, well, we had an easier time of this in 2021. I'm like, okay, but that was before inflation. And that is something you have to factor in. I mean, do I wish?
Oh, you have to. It's very real. It's very real. And it just, when we talk about like green energy policy, things that drive up the cost of water and electricity and utilities, I'm like, your town and city pays those. I mean, so you pay them, right? Mm-hmm. So all you're really doing is making everything in my life cost more, and then my taxes have to go up. So cut it out, right? So it's really, and that's where you guys come in, the liberty lobbyists and the people who go in there and say, you're putting price pressures and regulatory pressures on everyday people, and we have inflation, and we have all these other things. But you can't just raise everybody in state government's pay by the rate of inflation while everybody else is losing that much in inflation in their actual dollar values. So, people don't want to talk about that stuff, and they're like, it's like, no, this is real, all right? I mean, everybody is cutting corners, and it affects the wait staffs at restaurants. It affects the stores that we shop at. Yes. And so, the budget's got to go up, but it only went up a little.
Yeah. Yeah. And now let's talk about the bad stuff. Because
we should.
Yes. So there were two major issues. Of course, the one that got the most press was obviously the Group 2 retirement pensions. And the governor, man, I learned something about Governor Ayotte. She is one stubborn person. I didn't quite expect that. I thought she would be a little bit more open to negotiation. We kind of got to the point about a week ago. I was very firm. Actually, Monday, I was very firm. The budget will not pass. And that is because couplefold. We had it at the point where the conservatives didn't like what the legislature had compromised to the government's position on Group 2. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, we had the liberal Republicans who were being pressured by the governor to kill the budget because it wasn't exactly what she wanted. And the only way that the budget passed is because, and I think this was probably the best play, because I think that if the budget had failed in the second time around, she would have gotten exactly what she wanted. Okay. I don't really think there was too much if, and, or but about that. So what they did instead was they amended a House bill that had been tabled in the Senate, and the Senate has a supermajority, so they can easily do that. And they amended it to another compromise to the governor's position, which was much closer to the governor's position. Now, it did not include spiking, for those who are concerned about that. And I also want to say, by the way, I'm a policy person. I am not a dollars and cents person. So don't ask me any specifics about money. I will not be able to give you dollars and cents. Okay. But I have an overview. Okay. So my understanding is that what they ended up passing in that bill, which that bill then passed the House with the Rhino Caucus, the Unionists voting for it with the Democrats, basically. Okay. And then, and that's because even if they had put that in the budget still would have failed, because the Democrats wouldn't have voted for the budget because they didn't like all the other good stuff that I just named. Right. And they didn't like that they cut government positions, and they thought it was way too many cuts to government. Okay. So this was really, they had to sort of separate it out into two bills, but they really all kind of work together. So this bill passes, no spiking, it's Group 2, but then also the other thing that she wanted, she lost her mind, Governor Ayotte, over the Manchester funding thing. Now, if you're going to ask me politically why she cared so much about Manchester versus any other part of the state, which she shouldn't, you shouldn't be playing favorites to like one specific town versus another. But I think the real reason is because, Mayor Jay Ruas is like a very close personal friend of hers. They're very close. And I think he got in her ear and decided to make this some, massive thing. Basically for the 2 years, they had it as 1 year, it would be cut from where it is now, and then the next year they would get a little bit more money, but overall the 2 years would actually still be more than what the previous 2 years had been if you added the 2 years together. But all she could see in her mind was cut. So then there was a Manchester caucus of reps who were holding out on the budget because of that. So ultimately that got rolled into the bill with the Group 2 compromise to add, we threw them like another $1 million or something, and they're going to move on. Again, I actually had teachers in Manchester telling me that they were so upset with the governor that she was asking for more funding for a district that is rapidly losing enrollment. But here we are. Okay, so they got what they wanted out of that. That angered a lot of the, more hard conservatives in the House, who still voted against because of that. And ultimately, that's why it only passed by one vote, which was the speaker tie vote break.
I saw that.
Yes. The other thing that has not gotten nearly enough attention is the momnibus that was put into the budget. This is Senator Denise Ricciardi's momnibus bill, which I really knew nothing about until today. I did do research for this show on it, and it's a doozy. It is a doozy of left-wing policies, Republican Senator Denise Ricciardi. I put that in loose quotes. Okay, so number one, actually, I have a whole printout. Let me see. Medicaid coverage of maternal depression screenings at well child visits. Department shall recommend to the healthcare providers that they screen for maternal depression at all well child visits. Authorizes the department to use 3 Medicaid coverage categories. Does not specify that they can't use all 3. So that'll be fun. Mandate on private insurance to cover such screenings. Future appropriation for the department to set up a perinatal psychiatric provider consulting line. Appropriation for an agency study and report for the sustainability and barriers to birthing centers. That one's pretty small. It's only $30,000, which is like nothing when we're talking about the government. Coverage for perinatal individuals for mental health and substance abuse insurance may waive copay. I don't really understand that one, but okay. Mandate on private insurance to cover home visits for up to 12 months post-birth. Now, this is the really bad one that has a lot of reps very upset who are private employers in the state of New Hampshire. For employers with 20 plus employees, employee protection for up to 25 hours for medical appointments up to 1 year post-birth or adoption, that's for fathers and mothers, doesn't have to be paid leave. Now, they're not so upset about the policy as much as how it's written. It is written in such a way that it opens up for massive lawsuits against employers because it is so broadly written. For instance, it just says that the employee has to give a reasonable notification of time needed off. What's reasonable? Was it 5 minutes? Who determines what's reasonable? I mean, we're talking about massive lawsuits here. And it says when they're done with the appointment, they can go back to their job. Well, that's not always possible depending on what the job is. Mm-hmm. You know, if you're like, let's say you're a childcare provider, those children didn't just sit in an empty room while you were at your appointment. Like they were given, your classroom was shut down and they were sent elsewhere, right? So you're not going to be able to just go back to your job. Anyway, there are a lot of issues with how it's written. They were given assurances that they're going to put in bills next year to kind of clarify some of those things so that there are not a lot of liabilities to employers opening up. Then there's this fun little, what do they call it? The Child Care Scholarship, because apparently even Republicans now are buying into this nonsense that we have a child care crisis. Not that we just have a standard of living crisis. We specifically have to make sure everybody's working, but we have to just pay for their child care, okay? So there is a massive grant coming in from the feds for this, okay? But there will also be state funding in there, I think. I was a little bit unsure when I was reading through this. It looks like if the feds slow down the rate of the money, then we are going to make up the difference. Okay.
That sounds like the meat hook we usually get stuck on when there's federal money involved.
Indeed. It says there's a presumptive eligibility for this scholarship. So, if an applicant meets the threshold requirements defined by the department, they will receive child care scholarship funds during the application process until the earliest of 60 days from initial screening, date of final eligibility determination, expiration of submission period. Now, here's the no provider or recipient has to pay the funds that they were given during the presumptive eligibility period if they are ultimately determined to be ineligible for the scholarship. So we're going to give this money away, and then even if they're found to be ineligible, they don't have to pay it back. It's fine.
Who's going to be doing all this determining and measuring and deciding? And it sounds like a bunch of people at the health,
which is why the health department is about half of the state budget. We just keep adding on jobs. I guess technically we didn't add any jobs for this, but I'm just saying we have so many little programs like this. That's why that department is so bloated. I think a real goal for next term is to get a better makeup out of the finance committee, the part of the finance committee that deals specifically with the health department. There is an entire portion of that just deals with the health department, because we have not had strong people in there to make the cuts necessary, because that is an incredibly bloated department that only got way, way, way more bloated since COVID because of the COVID money, and they've never reined it back in since the COVID money has been gone.
They need to be doged.
Yeah, exactly. That's the good, the bad, the ugly of the budget from what I can see. Overall, not the worst budget I've seen. Last one was worse. We did get some good stuff for it. It's always a very stressful time of year because there's really no good decision. I will say I went into this very calm at the beginning of Thursday. I was like, I've made peace. Whatever happens, happens. And then when I saw it,
5 stages of grief.
Yes. When I initially saw it fail by 1, and I was like, I was that close to this vaccine rulemaking thing. Then I lost my mind. Okay. But then when I'm texting everybody, I'm like, you people need to get it together. I'm sure you can round up one person to reconsider. And yeah, and then they did. So it all happened. It was a great half hour of television.
Okay, so any other significant legislative wins for you guys this year?
Oh, for us this year, yeah, we have the entire
rebuild,
parental rights package. So we are supporting a large group of bills that we have coined as the parental rights package. Us, along with the other liberty groups in the state, are all supporting this package of bills that is headed to the governor. Now, she has already signed, obviously, the Parent Bill of Rights, but we have other bills too. We have, obviously, the ban on school mask mandates. That is the third time around. Is third time the charm? We shall find out, right?
Yes.
We have a bill guaranteeing you have the right to pass to your child's not medical records. That one didn't end up going through because it got Christmas tree to death. But we we have a bill to guarantee your access to your child's library records, both in public schools and in public libraries. Isn't that it's a crazy thing that that's not currently a thing? And yet I actually did know even before this, because I went to go get my daughter a library card, and they were like, oh, well, do you want your mother to have access to your library card? I'm like, she's 6. What do you mean, do you want your mother to? Okay.
She won't let me smoke and drink either.
HB 446 is making the youth risk behavior survey opt-in, requiring affirmative opt-in consent for the youth risk behavior survey. We have also a HB 324, which is banning obscene or sexually harmful materials from schools and libraries. So hopefully she will support the entire package of bills. We already had a bill passed, which we have had previously vetoed, which was HB 223. Oh, never mind. I'm not going to say the number because now I'm blanking. I'm going to give the wrong one. I just know I am. It is a bill to limit the authority of town health officers. That one has been, that was I want to say my 5th time around with that bill, or some version of that bill. And we had finally gotten it to the finish line last year, and the governor vetoed, but Governor Ayotte signed, which was fantastic. Obviously, we were supporting, EFAs, universal EFAs, so that's been signed. We had a bill signed already for, apparently you can do psychotherapy in public schools without being licensed. Well, now you have to be licensed.
Yeah.
So we closed that loophole. We have... we have an issue with our vaccine religious exemption forms. We kind of messed up, the legislature did. We used to have it so that any parent could just sign a religious exemption, just write one out on a scrap of paper and sign it and be done. And then, but they used to have to get it notarized. Well, when we took out the notary requirement, apparently changed one word from statement to form. And then the health department decided that means that you have to use our form, which requires a whole bunch more information than the law says. So we had a bill to fix that. That's going there. We have, I think that might be it. Yeah, that's it. Yep. But we did pretty good this year. Not bad. If we get this whole parental rights package signed, should be great. Of course, the big one that I'm holding out for is the ban on public school mask mandates. That's
been a big one. Yeah. I mean, I was really excited when you helped push through the one that prevented the local public health officials from being petty tyrants. We're really excited about that one. All right. Well, Melissa Blasek, Executive Director of Rebuild New Hampshire and a former state legislator, and a great many other things, including a mom and a neighbor. She lives in the same town as me. She was one of my legislators when she was a legislator. And now you do this. So thank you very much for all that stuff. How do people get in touch with you or Rebuild?
Yeah. So rebuildnh.com. Please get on our email list during the season. I send out weekly updates. I try to make it as easy as possible to do 5 minutes of activism a week. It really does take everybody kind of working together to make that possible, to get all these things over the line. And you can always email me, director@rebuildnh. I'm on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, at RebuildNH or at Melissa Blasek NH.
All right. Thanks for your time, and keep it up. It's great work.
Yeah.
Talk.